Hey everyone, my name's Teresa. Welcome or welcome back if you're new. I post videos every single weekend. They're really quite random because I don't like putting myself in a box. So if you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe down below, and we're just gonna jump right into it because I'm going to be honest, this is going to be a lengthy video, more lengthy than what is normally on my channel. So I'm just gonna jump right into it. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a timeline and then kind of just speak rawly about my, is that a word? Sure. Rawly about my experience of being a leader in a church at the age of 20. So to kind of go back here, I got my notes on my phone that I almost just dropped, but they're here. And I'm just going to take you through this little timeline that I created. So, when I was young, I am still in a part of the generation where church was not an option. We were very much forced to go to church. We went to, and I say we, my siblings and I went to a private Catholic school growing up. And so just very like Christian based family. So, because of that, we went through all the normal church milestones. So, what that means is baptism, we did Sunday school, we received our Bible, we did Holy Communion, and then did confirmation that ended up being so that we could be voting members of the church. So, already just heavily involved in the church without having a choice. Now, I'm gonna make it sound like it's like terrible to not give your child or kids a choice when it comes to going to church. That's up to you. I mean, ultimately, I don't like it, but there were more pros than cons to it for me personally. So I'm just gonna say that. So because of just all this involvement, we also ended up volunteering a lot. So this meant I was reading in church at a really young age, unfortunately. I still don't know half of the words in the Bible. And really now as an adult, I know nobody does. Nobody knows half of the words in the Bible. We volunteered a lot. I think I started teaching Sunday school when I was in high school, but I actually think I started helping out with Sunday school when I was like in elementary school because I remember I was helping another adult pretty early on in life. So, and I did that for years until college actually. So yeah, I did it for years. End of elementary school and then college. Thank you, Snapchat. So, there's that. And unfortunately, a lot of people remember me reading as a kid in church, which is kind of unfortunate because like I said, the words in the Bible are really hard. So, moving along, I was offered to be on church council in 2020, and I was 20 years old when that started. Um, I would have been turning 21, but the terms start in February, so I wasn't, my birthday's October, so I was still 20 when I was offered to be on church council, and I had no clue how a church worked. I literally didn't even understand what happened on a council, but both of my parents were on council and served on other committees. My mom was on youth committee. My dad was actually president of council at one point in time. So, oh my gosh, sorry guys. Between Snapchat and Instagram in the mornings, I don't know. So, I literally like no clue on how a church worked and the inner workings of a church. So, I then got voted onto council for a 3-year term. Now, I did not know until like last year or maybe like the end of this year. No, last year because this is still the start of 2023. That you could take like a 2-year or 1-year term. I was just offered a 3-year term, and again, going back to I didn't know anything about being on church council. I took a 3-year term, and I know part of my thinking was I really do not plan on moving out of, my hometown in 3 years, and yeah, and I still actually don't really have plans to move out, to be honest, but, anyways, my hometown at least. So, I took the 3-year term, and yes, you get nominated to be onto council and other committees of the church, but then for council, and I guess other committees too, but for sure council, the congregation has to vote you in. So you have to provide a bio of yourself and then you get voted in at the annual meeting um, to be a representative on council for the entire congregation. That alone is a huge responsibility. Um, and you'll kind of hear about that more later on. So, anyways, continuing. So, because I was on council, and because you're on council, you also have to be on another committee. So, at first, I was put onto memorial committee, but then my assistant principal from high school leaned over to me and she said, "Do you want to be on the youth committee? Because I can never make those meetings. Um, and I don't even know when like Memorial meets, but I will gladly switch with you." And I said, "Yes, absolutely." So we ended up switching the other committee that we were serving on. So that happened. And as I said a little bit ago, I started on church council in 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. COVID had hit. And I learned very quickly how extremely political church is. And I just think it's funny because we have these things called council chats that we started doing like last year. And our recent one was really focused on members bringing up the fact that church has gotten very political. And I laughed because I was like, the people who are talking about this are literally people who served on committees in church, and I'm like, Do you not realize how political it is? Because it's extremely political." So, anyways, that's a little side note. But started in 2020, which means we had the responsibility to do what's best for our church during the beginning of COVID. So we did end up closing the church, but I will say this is literally probably the one time that we all did not agree on something. For the last year, we all very much have agreed on the same things. A lot of things have we voted on have unanimously, can't say that word, but passed because we've all just agreed to vote yes on things. This was the first time that I really saw just like different sides going on. Personally, for me, we are a very old church, okay? And by that, I mean we have a huge percentage of older members in our congregation. Our biggest online audience, you guys, is literally the baby boomers, okay? That's how old this is. Like, there's a lot of them online, but when you look at the live streams of the church, it's just all old people, okay? And so my own decision was to close just because I know my parents have health issues. I can only imagine what the rest of the congregation has as far as that goes. And we have a responsibility to do what's best for our people, right? So, next thing, I got a lot of questions during that time about, well, why can churches choose to be open during this time and everything else has to close, right? So this is all because of bylaws, and this is when I learned what bylaws are and what do they mean. So bylaws are literally laws of the church that allow us to bypass the law. So when it came down to the decision to close the church for 2020 a little bit, we got a recommendation from the synod, which is basically church management, if you must, like CEO, I guess, of the churches was in certain areas. And they said their recommendation, and we were able to say, yes, leave the church open. No, don't leave the church open. And that all goes into bylaws of a church. There's also something called the Constitution of a church. So, yes, we have the Constitution of the United States of America. Churches have their own constitution as well. And it's very thorough in, everything from memberships to committees and financially what we need to be responsible for and all of this extra stuff. So, not only was I learning very quickly how political church was, I was learning very quickly about bylaws and constitutions. Personally, I don't think churches should be allowed to do that. I don't know. I cannot wrap my head around what makes church so special that you can bypass the law on certain things. Like, not that it was a law to close during that time, but you get what I'm saying. So, once the church opened up, this is when I was added a lot of responsibilities. I very quickly was put into a position of figuring out why can we not get families into the church? And what can we do to get them back in the church? Because we have just gone downhill really since I was a kid. And it's been really hard to talk to the congregation about this because it's not going to be like how it was when I was growing up. When you had the families volunteering, you had the kids running around in church and volunteering as well. It's just not like that anymore. Anybody who's a parent knows how busy it gets in your own life, let alone your kids' lives. I stood up during the last council chat and I told people, like, I have seen these kids' schedules and they're overscheduled. Like, from the moment they wake up, excuse me, from the moment they wake up to the time they go to bed, it's always something. And unfortunately, we're always competing with sports. When I was a kid, that wasn't a thing, but now just culturally, that's where we're at. So, I was just very quickly put into this position on figuring out why aren't people coming to church? Why are families not going to church? And I have my own personal thoughts about that that I'm not going to share. So, and that's a really big question and even a big responsibility to put onto somebody who's only 20 years old, whose brain's not even fully developed yet. So, in this whole thing, I started to become the whole face of the youth. Everybody knew that if they had a complaint about youth, they knew that they could come talk to me. And I made myself very available because unfortunately, there were times when somebody would go up to the pastor and she would actually shut people down because she heard the complaint too many times. I understand, but then it also makes them feel like they're not heard. So I always made sure my whole thing was my door is always open. You can come talk to me and we can have a discussion, right? And then later on, once I kind of worked a little bit more with somebody who I call my church witch, but you can insert a different word there. Um, we both made up like a whole face of being the youth. So I was half of that face, she was the other half of that face. So, yeah, not only were they piling a bunch of heavy questions onto me, it was also all these other responsibilities because I actually took a short position at the church to be a Sunday school coordinator. And the amount of stuff people put on me just physically, like, oh, we want to do this with the youth. When would this work in their schedule? And it was really hard because we follow the school schedule. And very much now, this time of year to the end of the year, they have a lot of breaks. And so I'm just gonna leave it at that. It was a lot physically. And being on the youth committee was actually the main source of my stress. It had nothing to do with council. Like council was fine because council was not putting on events or anything like that for the church. It was all just Youth. Youth obviously is a program. We are trying to run a program, and that requires us to put on extra events. Usually seasonally, like in the fall, we would actually have we go to the pumpkin patch and do that. We had our huge gingerbread house event that we do in December. And so all of that was put onto my plate at the age of 20. So not only did I have all these questions about why aren't families in churches anymore? Why is it not how it was when you were a child? I just had all these extra stuff piling on to me, and a lot of it coming from older members of the church. So not only was I kinda taking on that responsibility, I also started taking on the administration kind of roles. So I was the one to start taking minutes during these youth meetings. I don't understand how the youth team even works right now because there's no policies for anything. There's no outline of saying this is what you're responsible for. There's no that includes your secretary, your treasurer. How do you not have a treasurer when you run a program? I know I try to keep track of the expenses because I had access to the budget because of being on council, and I literally got chewed out by my pastor for doing that. And unfortunately, our office administrator took the hit for that, which is very unfortunate. But yeah, like my friend and I quickly realized somebody else is using our money because we don't have any money. And so we called people out for that, and it backfired completely. But if this committee actually functioned like a normal committee, like council does, it would be a lot smoother. So I don't understand why, just why, why? How do they function? How do they work? Because being on this committee has really just been you get through what you needed to get through for the next couple of months. We organize different things. Like I just did a timeline for the rest of this year, and we have Holy Communion to figure out. We have Bible, third grade Bibles. That's when they receive their Holy Bibles at our church. Uh, we have confirmation. We need to figure that out. So that's when these kids get confirmed at a certain age, and then they become voting members of the church. There's just a lot, and it just frustrated me being on youth because how do you just go about that, but you're not even attempting to fix what's already broken? I use the iceberg analogy a lot with them. So, right, the iceberg analogy, what people see is on top. So for us with the youth program, what people see is truthfully like when we are physically present in the church. What they don't see is everything underneath, right? Like an iceberg that is like your policies, your guidelines, the terms, all of this extra kind of stuff. And when you even look at an iceberg, right, all of that is the base, right? The foundation of what makes up the rest of it, right? So I've never understood that. I did end up taking a team dynamics class in college, my last actual semester of college, and it made me open my eyes to be like, we're a mess, and I can't be a part of this because nothing is being done to fix the problems that are already existing. And so, yeah, it's been a lot, you guys. The last 3 years has been a lot, and unfortunately, well, fortunately, like I said earlier, none of it has to do with council. It all has to do with youth. And it's just it's been hard because I've come to the term now where I'm like, I've given the false narrative of my life that I'm a very Christian girl and I believe, well, Christian woman, and I believe the Bible and stuff like that. And I really don't. I am not that Christian of a person. I don't believe that the Bible is a book on how to live. Well, yeah, a book on how to live. I believe it's guidelines. And so there's just a lot that I took on with this church, and I didn't get paid like anything for it. And obviously church is all volunteer base, but there comes a point where you have to say I'm worth something and I deserve to be, this sounds terrible, but like I deserve to be rewarded for the work that I put in. Currently, I am a certified digital marketer. I also took on that role. Um, I think I told you guys this, and I think I did a day in my life as a digital marketer on TikTok, but I don't think I posted it on YouTube. But I also took on that role because again, people don't know how to do that stuff in the church. Again, it's a very, very old church, and we do not have the college kids anymore to take on that responsibility. Church is just, and religion really is just not a priority in people's lives. And honestly, no judgment. I get it. I really truthfully get it. I only did all of this crap because that's how I was raised. I was inbreeded in a church. If you were here for the beginning of the video, you know my family was like the perfect church family in the sense of we did all of this stuff. We did all the volunteering. We did all those milestones that I talked about earlier. And it's just it's hard because then that's your image, and you have a family image in the church to uphold, which is freaking sickening for me to say because that's so like, ugh, I don't know. Just sometimes the traditions that we have. Um, but it was a lot. I reached burnout at the end of this year, and I did not have I did not have a term on youth, but because my council term is up after tomorrow, actually. So tomorrow's my last council meeting. Um, then I was like, you know what? I'm stepping back from the church because I cannot be putting this much time and energy in for literally nothing. Um, and now too, like I said, I have a bachelor's degree in business administration. I am a certified customer service rep. I am a certified digital marketer. So, yeah. Anyways, this is not to scare anybody out of going to a church, not going to church. I will have to say that none of this, me leaving the church, even none of it even has to do with my sexuality, and I'm a lesbian. You know, it becomes a lot of pressure to put on a 20-year-old to figure out all the issues of the church and how do we resolve them, and how do you move on when there's people in the church that don't want to move on because people are afraid of change. um so it's not to scare anybody away, it's just the harsh reality of being 20 in a church, and specifically being 20 in a church and being in a church that is very old. um so yeah. Anyways, this is long enough. I hope you guys liked this. I didn't scare you away if you're thinking about like joining a church or being more involved in a church. My biggest tip is learn to say no and be okay with that. Even if you say no to something and it doesn't get picked up by somebody else. I actually, short story, was supposed to do devotions, like film them and post them onto our social media platforms or really digital platforms because it would have been the website and Facebook. And that was during the time I was directing a Charlie Brown Christmas, and I said, "No, no." They said, "Oh, no big deal. We'll get the music director to do it, who is also kind of taken on the role of like not IT, but just the more digital stuff of the church." And then he didn't do it either. And people don't understand, like, there are certain situations that people literally do not pick up. So, yeah. Anyways, if you guys like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe down below, hit the bell for notifications. I post every single weekend. And I'll see you all later. I hope you all have a fantastic week. And February will be starting this week, which is insane. So I love you guys. Thank you all so much, by the way, for 116 subscribers. Um, that means so much to me. I can't believe we got over 100 subscribers in the first place. So just thank you all so much for your love and support, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.